Putting together a presentation is more than a series of slides. It's
How are you taking them on a journey? People love to be on journeys.
If you don't love yourself and love your story, you will never be able to tell it effectively.
Welcome back to the No Fear Presenting Podcast. I'm your chief fear stomper, Mike Teixeira. My next guest is Jean Card. Jean spent 6 years in the executive branch of the U.S. government as a speechwriter for the Secretaries of Treasury and Labor and the Attorney General. Since leaving the White House, she's continued as a speechwriter, been a columnist for the U.S. News and World Report, served as a spokeswoman for national organizations, and been a political commenter in national and global media. Welcome, Jean. How are you today?
Hey, Mike. Great to be with you. I'm doing well. Yourself?
Good. It's sunny here in New Hampshire and, no complaints. A little toasty, but all good.
Well, we're neighbors. I'm not far south of you in Boston. And yeah, we're having a slightly warmer than average day. And my dog is very unhappy about it.
Oh, no. What happened? Did it eat something or?
She's having a bout of the unfortunate dog diarrhea. I don't think it's due to the weather.
Oh, no.
She would probably blame it on the weather because she does not care for the heat.
Hang in there with that. Sorry about that. All right. So today, in the No Fear Presenting Podcast, we'd like to help presenters and speakers find ways to present more easily. But before we get into the meat of that stuff, I'd really like to get to know a little bit about you. Give us your origin story. How did you walk the path and become a speechwriter?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike. I appreciate you asking. I think that I was a writer almost from the time I was a talker. To me, they're very similar things. I don't know what it is about my brain that was made different, but for me, the way that I speak and the way that I write have always been very similar. And I started keeping a journal, and I loved writing for school when I was really young. In junior high, I had a teacher tell me that I should consider writing screenplays because because I had the way I wrote was very suited to the spoken word. I mean, I was in 8th grade. I was so young. And
yeah, 8th grade, they were telling me not to show up. So
well, I was a girl and a nerd, so maybe it's a little different. But so it was said to me very early on. All I knew is that I loved to write, and I went to college and I was an English major. And again, professors said you have a unique voice. By the time I got out of school, my family had become interested in politics, and I was following along in their footsteps. And I decided to move to Washington, D.C. right out of college. I basically showed up in Washington and said, so I can write, and seems like you guys need that. Seems like you need better words in politics.
Wow.
Literally just started telling people. And then someone recommended, I was on a job interview, and someone recommended that I read a book called What I Saw at the Revolution by Peggy Noonan, and she was one of President Reagan's speechwriters. So right. I left the job interview. I bought the book, and I said, "Oh, yeah, that would be great. That would be perfect for me because I love the spoken word. I love to write." And it took me a while, but I started telling everyone that I knew that I wanted to be a speechwriter, and there I was in Washington D.C. So when George W. Bush was elected president, I had been in D.C. long enough. People knew me. They knew what I wanted to do. And there were a lot of opportunities in his administration to write speeches. So I wrote for 3 different cabinet members. And that really set me up for a lifetime of speechwriting and also coaching my clients in how to be more effective public speakers.
Yeah. Wow. What a great story of manifesting your future, just telling people, hey, I'm a speechwriter, and eventually you fake it until you make it, and there you are at the White House. Wow. Now, Growing up, did you have any role models, anybody who was a storyteller or communicator that you really looked up to?
I suppose it was my dad. My dad, who passed just a couple of years ago, he was really funny. He was really charismatic, and I watched him at grown-up parties telling stories and getting big laughs. And, I don't consider myself a funny writer, but I do think that gift of gab, if you will, is part of who I am. I like communicating. I rarely hold back. And that's something that I learned from my dad.
So now what was your biggest hurdle when you were working in the White House? What was your trial of tribulation?
Oh my gosh, being a speechwriter in government is such an interesting role. And one of the one of the steepest hills that speechwriters climb, especially in the beginning, especially at the beginning of a new administration, is helping their colleagues understand how important it is to have face time with your principal, right? You cannot write in a vacuum. You have to be with, in my case, those cabinet members, the people who are going to the podium. If I sat in an office down the hall and didn't have interaction with my principal, there's no way I could write an effective speech for them. So there's a lot of work, and depends on the agency and the experience of the people you're working with. But my best friends in government were on the scheduling team, the advanced teams, like the people who made sure that events would go well, that the attorney general, the cabinet secretary, whatever it was, they understood the steps that go into creating an effective speech. And one of those steps is space time with the speechwriter. And that means an opportunity for me to interview that principal and help them picture the scenario they're going into. This is what the room will look like. This is who the audience is. This is what the audience is interested in. These are their pain points. This is what they find joy in. Given all that, what do you want to say to these people? What's in your heart? What's in your mind? And pulling out of them what is in their heart and mind as a speaker, then it's my job to take very fast notes.
Right.
I mean, that's really, that's my process, right? I take very fast notes, and then I consider it to be my draft. My conversation with the speaker is the draft. And then I start to clean it up, organize it, add more information and stories if necessary. But the actual words of the speaker, the way they talk, to capture that in an interview and in note-taking at the very onset of the process is really important.
Yeah. And did you find that you were unique among your peers with that process? Because the myth, and I don't know if it's a myth because it's got a seed of reality, the myth is that the speechwriter does, type on a typewriter, runs into the room, puts it in front of the politician who then delivers it beautifully. Were you unique, or is it more common that you actually get that one-on-one time to craft the scenario and then build from there?
I am not exactly sure, but I can tell you that I was popular. There's an office in the executive branch called presidential personnel, and that's where all of the political appointees go through, and they're assigned across government to their roles. And presidential personnel liked me, and they placed me with several different cabinet members. I was in demand, and I suspect it was because of that. But and I'm not even sure how I knew to do it, to be honest with you. I guess I knew it wasn't me going to the podium. It wasn't me going to the podium. I wanted the speech to sound like them. I wanted them to be comfortable with what they were saying. I think I have as much of an ego as any writer, but I didn't feel that, I can't wait to hear that person deliver my words. I mean, there's plenty of ego in jobs like that. For example, when I wrote for the Treasury Secretary, his style was actually to read the speech that I had written, at his desk, mark it up, send back edits. We would go through a process and get the speech to where he wanted it to be. But he would go to the podium without notes, without a speech, and speak extemporaneously. But what I wrote was released to the press about an hour before he spoke, which means that the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, they started writing their stories, and they would pull from my written remarks, and they would pull from what the secretary said at the podium. So the fact that I saw myself essentially quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, that's plenty for my ego. I didn't need Secretary Snow to speak every word that I wrote. If he was comfortable and happy, I was comfortable and happy.
That's great. And how intuitive. How that's a cool gift. I had to learn to stop and think about the audience first, think about the room that they were going to be in. And you did that instinctively. That's pretty admirable. So very cool. So now you're in politics and you leave politics, and now I would assume you have a mix of corporate and political clients still. Is that true?
I still work with people in government. I work with corporate clients. I work with a lot of nonprofit clients. So it's an interesting mix.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest difference is between a political speech and the speeches that maybe the nonprofit or the corporate world is looking for?
Well, I don't think there are actually a ton of differences if you break down a speech into some core elements. I mean, most speeches hope to persuade, to inspire, to touch someone. I do a lot of writing for nonprofit fundraising events. And what's the goal there? To tell a beautiful story, to touch a heart, to motivate people, in that case, to make a donation to the nonprofit. If it's a political speech, you hope to motivate them to support you as a candidate, or probably also write a check. So I think there are a lot of common elements. It just comes out in a different way. I think there's more. I know you talk a lot about, your podcast is about fear and beating fear. Fear is employed more in political speeches, I think, than anywhere else. If I'm writing for, a corporate speech, there's not a lot of reason for them to create fear. That's the opposite of what, right? Corporate America wants a safe place. They want to inspire confidence, trust.
Right.
Whereas, and at a nonprofit, it's really pulling on the heartstrings. But in politics, there is leveraging of fear. It's like, oh, things are so scary. I can save you.
Yeah.
That's a technique that is interesting.
Oh, that is such a good point. I never thought of it that way. And now that I'm thinking of it, the corporate client does want to start at a place of, imagine your world transformed. Imagine a place of hope, picturing the end goal of that positive place. Huh.
Yeah, like
so fascinating.
Our company will never let you down. Our company will always do the right thing. I mean, they have to create a sense that everything is great, always has been, and always will be. Because that's what shareholders like, my friend. That's what shareholders
exactly.
like. And that's a big audience, right? I know you and I have we'll talk about audience, but the audience of shareholders, I think, is a little different than the audience of potential voters or the audience of donors. Audience changes everything.
Absolutely. Which is why you and I believe that that's where you start first, because there's no sense of you coming to the table and start drafting a speech or a presentation and saying, this is what I want to say. Because 9 times out of 10, I don't think your audience wants exactly the same thing as you do. So you got to get that alignment first, right?
That's right. You really got to think about them. And I like having my principals even close their eyes and picture the audience. Or maybe they know someone who's going to be there. Think about that person.
That's a great technique. Now, one thing I hated doing in school, and I had to grow an appreciation for it, was creating the dreaded outline. And now I can't live without it. I don't want to start making slides or start drafting actual speech notes until I have a clear outline. What is your process around crafting an outline? Because I think it's really important when we talk about alleviating fear. Would you agree to have a solid outline?
Yeah. And, again, I come back to audience on that. To me, the outline is the roadmap for the audience. You want your audience to feel comfortable. You don't want your audience to feel like you're taking them on a walk in the forest without a compass. I mean, who wants to go on that walk, right?
Right.
So if you have a clear structure and an idea and you tell them at the beginning, this is where we're going to go today, the audience can relax and be comfortable and look forward to the journey. And I do love the age-old structure of a speech. Tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again. You bookend it with your thesis. This always reminded me when I started writing speeches of writing essays in college, which I loved, and in high school. I loved essay writing. And I loved that thesis at the beginning, restated at the end, how it ties everything together and it pulls a thread through. An outline also is a good exercise to help you to remember that you don't need to make 20 points. You probably only need to make 3. Because people can't really remember more than that, and they can't enjoy more than that either.
Yeah, and I love your analogy about going on a walk through the woods. I mean, there's the fear of going after someone who doesn't know where they're going, so that can make you uncomfortable. But there's nothing more annoying than going on a walk with someone and they keep going off the path and taking little side trips and then getting back on the path. And that's how so many speeches and presentations end up, with all these curly-Q side jaunts. And I find like my main challenge in the room is to say, this is the goal of where the audience needs you to take them. Stay on that path. Keep that in your sight. Yeah.
Be kind to your audience. It's the right thing to do. It's a better experience for them. It's a better experience for you. If you are not showing them where you're going and it's not very clear, it's mean. It's mean. Don't make people sit there and endure that. And also, don't put yourself in a position where the audience goes like this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're lost. They'd rather check their messages than follow, what this scary journey you're taking them on.
Yeah. Checking their phone is immediate red flag that you're doing something wrong and you're losing them. Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. So one thing that I'm curious about is, you and I have been at this for a while. How has speechwriting changed in the age of TEDx talks, presentation slides, online TikToks and content producers? How do you think it's transformed the clients you work with?
I like that question a lot. I encourage my clients to explore what is the best format for them, because there is more flexibility than there used to be, which I think is good news in speaking, right? It used to be so standard. There was a podium and an audience, and the only person talking was the speaker. And I think TED Talks got things that started us down the road of at least a more relaxed posture and the illusion of a conversation. I mean, a TED Talk is not a conversation. A TED Talk is a speech, but the movement and the style was mimicking something that felt more like a conversation. Now, I tell my clients, just have it be a conversation. Talk to your audience, ask them questions, have them raise their hand, have them give a shout out. It does something really important to the brain, I think, because if you think about this, Mike, you and I may have talked about this in the past. I think there's something primal about when we talk about the fear in speaking. Imagine that this is, 100,000, a million years ago. I don't have my timeline of human beings correct, but we're early humans, okay? And
we're not scientists. We're presentation experts.
Exactly. I just need to know my strength here. But I'm an early human. My knuckles might still be dragging on the ground, kind of thing. And I'm standing in front of a group, and there are pairs of eyes on me, lots of eyes on me, and I'm the only one, and they're all looking at me. I'm pretty sure in early human times that is the moment before I got devoured, right?
Right. Yeah. So it was baked into your DNA from that moment on.
This is a scary thing. I mean, fast forward to more genteel times. If I'm the only one talking at a social event, at a party, or in a meeting with my colleagues, if I'm the only one talking, what am I? Can I swear on your podcast?
Absolutely.
If I'm the only one talking, I'm an asshole.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay? I'm an asshole. Yeah. And nobody likes me. And everybody can't wait for me to stop talking. Okay, so that's normal social behavior, or preferable social behavior, is I talk, you talk, someone else talks, da-da-da-da-da. And then, so say we learn to be successful in our careers.
And not just you talk, she talks, you show some curiosity about the people you're in the room with.
Exactly. Yeah. You follow up on something they say. Like, this is successful human interaction. But you get to a certain point in your career and everyone says, oh, you've been so successful. We love the way you communicate. You're a great manager. You're a great leader. Go to the front of a room and only you talk.
Yeah, exactly. Why did we develop that?
It's not normal. It's not normal. No one's done it. They've been successful doing something very different. So I tell my clients that, and I say, so we're going to try to make this feel like a conversation. Now, that can be through interaction with their audience. A lot of people like the fireside chat format. If a client doesn't want to stand there and drone on, or if they're not comfortable with audience interaction, them at the front pulling out of this huge ballroom, I say, go back to the event organizers and say, I'm so looking forward to your event. I can't wait to talk to your members. Who on your board could interview me, or who in your leadership team could interview me? That's the format I like.
Yeah, I want to emphasize this point because this has come up on a panel we were on together. And I think it's such a powerful, well, let me put it this way. I think it is very empowering, a very empowering message that you can share with the audience, that not everyone can memorize a 5 to 15 minute speech and deliver it authentically.
That's right.
So there are other options. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, this really became extra clear to me when I worked with a client for a year or so who had a stutter.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, I'm not sure if this is true for other individuals with stutters, but for him, a printed speech or a speech on a teleprompter absolutely triggered that speech impediment. And it was just a recipe. The traditional speech set him up for a lot of anxiety and for, not for failure necessarily, but for a speech that wasn't as effective as he was capable. He was a very effective communicator. But a conversation with a colleague or someone who had a similar area of expertise, the stutter stayed away. And so we learned, he and his team learned to ask for what they wanted. And I extrapolated that to other clients. Why shouldn't everybody ask for that? I mean, in his case, we were dealing with something very specific and very challenging, but it's true for everyone. And some people a stutter is very obvious, but a lot of people are up at a podium with very dry mouth. Some people are, blushing, or, and the red like comes up from the chest and slowly
Right,
comes
right,
from
right.
the face. Like, and people
I
know
always
that
feel
it's
so
happening.
bad when I see that happen to someone. Yeah.
There are physical signs of anxiety. Sometimes they show, sometimes they don't. But the bottom line is we don't have to suffer. There are ways to get around through past that anxiety. And if a conversation with someone is where you're comfortable, hallelujah. I think it's more fun for the audience too, because it gives that variety.
Yeah, and now there's names for it. The fireside chat. Can we have a lounge setting? Can we have a Q&A, a panel? There's a lot you can ask for, and I love how empowering that is to say, not every format's going to work for you. I mean, it's part of the reason I like slides in some contexts. I feel like slides are a way for you to have the highlights of your outline mapped out for you, so you can remove the pressure of memorization for those of us who struggle with it,
Absolutely. And a slide has you looking generally up, which is more engaging than looking down at paper. I like slides as notes, as guardrails or guideposts for speakers.
Yeah, but it's the fine line, where we get crazy sometimes, and a little bit is great. How about a lot of bit? And that'll make my speech even better.
Yeah, I've become such an extremist. Like when I speak myself, I don't use any slides anymore. I mean, if the event organizer says it's important to the format, I mean, I'll put something down. But I really don't like to do it if I don't have to. And again, this is all about this idea of pushing back on event organizers. I don't mean to talk badly about event organizers. They have a job to do, and they're doing it. But the fact of the matter is, if you've been invited to speak, they need you. You are the commodity. You don't work for them, right? Like they need you there. You're valuable. So say, you'll get more of me if we do it the way I'll be at my best.
Yeah, and I love the way you're putting that, because it doesn't have to be a confrontational conversation. It's more about, I really want this to be a success. I know this is where I'm at my best, and can we tweak the format? Yeah.
And if
awesome.
if someone is at a level where this conversation is being handled by their team, by their staff, which is true, when I work with people in government in particular, the team is interacting with the event organizers. And I encourage the team members to say, the secretary is really looking forward to this speech. The secretary can't wait to meet your members. Your issues are so important to the secretary or the congressman or whatever it is,
right.
He or she is looking forward to it and wants it to be a big success, which is true.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, that's a new development, I feel, that people can consider different formats. Now, what about language? I feel the formal language is definitely dropping away from the business and political context. People are trying to be more authentic, trying to be more casual. Talk to me about how you walk that line between too far casual and still professional, and how you find that balance.
Oh gosh, it's so true, isn't it? I struggle with this myself because I swear a lot. Right, I already had to ask you permission to swear, but I've always had a pretty foul mouth, so I've had to practice this over the years because I've worked in formal environments and I've worked on my own filter. But if someone is in search of authenticity, I will watch clients sometimes as they speak one-on-one to me, and I notice sometimes they shift the way they're speaking, and they choose different words when they feel like they're practicing a presentation or a talking point or a message. And I'll stop them and say, who are you right now? Where did Mike go? Well, I was talking to Mike a minute ago.
Exactly.
And just get people, because people don't know that they're doing it. So in other words, if you're Mike, but for some reason at the podium you talk like Pete, I don't know who Pete is, but but some people are like, oh well, I don't want to talk like Pete, I want to talk like Trump. And people do,
Well,
people feel that way. I mean, people
yeah,
do feel that way. Like politicians are like, oh, I want to be more like Trump. No, don't be, don't be like Trump. Be like you. Who are you? I mean, it's really getting in touch with who you are, how you talk.
yeah,
There's not a
yeah.
third way. It's not like the formal way or the authentic way. The authentic way is the you way.
Right. And it's so interesting what you're saying here, because I think there are so many people out there helping people in public speaking and presentation delivery. And they're going to come at it in multiple different ways. Some folks are super focused on the slide design or the outline or the written word. But one vital component I think everyone should really integrate into their toolkit is the listening. Listen to that person when you're first meeting them. Listen to and you talked about this earlier, that pre-interview, that face-to-face discussion about what is it you want to say and how do you want to say it, is so important. And I love that extra part that you're bringing where you're listening for the person they are before they step up in front of the room, because that's where the authenticity lies. And have you ever had an awkward moment where you called someone on that and they bristled at the fact that they didn't think they were delivering it differently than they actually won?
Yeah, I try to do this in a private one-on-one, honestly. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I
totally.
had a it actually more frequently it would result in an emotional moment with
Yeah.
because it really touches a nerve, and because it's such a relief when someone says, "Hey, I don't know who you are right now, but I really want to hear from you." And it
Yeah.
can be very touching. I had this has happened in particular in my conversations with women of color. I've had several clients who are women of color who are shifting into a different way of talking that they think would be more, that will get them further in the workplace, and
Right.
it's not coming naturally, and they lose authenticity. And those have been very touching conversations, because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reasons that they started speaking inauthentically come from a place of real pain and real hardship.
Yeah. I don't know when this is actually going to get published, but I think it's timely, because I think about that a lot with Kamala Harris. I think that she had a very authentic voice, a very down-to-earth delivery during the debates when she ran for president the first time. Then she got into office, and I feel like somebody got a hold of her and tried to put her in that kind of, you're now in the White House political straitjacket, and she fumbled, and she had a real tough time. And now it's like the sun's coming up over the mountains again, and she's
herself.
come back into her voice. Yeah. Do you think that might be the case there?
I have to wonder. I do have to wonder, because I've had these conversations with women from different backgrounds who, at some point in their life, said, don't be you at the boardroom table. Be, some formal white bitch. I don't know who they're going to be, but it's not that.
Yeah.
It's and I remember thinking, in the last election, seeing more casual. I'm trying to think. Did I see? Was it Mindy Kaling? Am I saying her name right? The comedian. She did a show with Vice President Harris at some point. Like I don't know. I wish I could be
like
more
a talk
specific.
show or something.
Yeah, it was like they were cooking together. I don't know what I suppose with it. I can picture them cooking.
I know it wasn't the Mindy Project.
And talking about their no, it was more like a talk show, but they were talking about their shared background and their what they like to cook with Indian cooking. And I thought, gosh, what a fun woman. I would really love to hang out with her and cook with her or whatever. And you're right.
Yeah.
And there would be these speeches, sort of the White House background speeches. It's like, where'd she go?
Yeah. She disappeared. She disappeared. And I think she suffered for it, like a lot of people who try to step into a role that's not comfortable, because then the thoughts didn't connect as easily, and she would get into these circular repetitions of what she wanted to say, trying to find it.
Maybe. She may have been having the battle in her head of the two voices, her real voice, her authentic voice, and the voice that she felt she was supposed to use.
Yeah.
I mean, she's also an attorney, and let me tell you, I worked with a lot of attorneys. attorneys, I don't know, something really bad happens to them in law school. I don't know what is said to them or done to them, but they come out of law school. I wrote for the Attorney General, so I worked at the Department of Justice, which is all lawyers and me.
Yeah, he's like king of the lawyers, right?
Yeah. So it's all, Ivy League, and they're very proud of themselves, and they think they're great writers, but they have been trained to write and communicate in a very specific way, which is very unfriendly to human beings. Like a law brief, right, which is just like drilled into them. This is how you write a law brief. This is how you back up, 100,000 points with 100,000 footnotes. Ugh, terrible way of communicating. So I'm curious about the legal background too, and that's something that probably has to be overcome.
Yeah,
honestly,
which really highlights another aspect where I think we bring value to this kind of work is you might have been trained that way to write a legal brief that way, but you need someone to hold up the mirror and say, okay, but the audience you're speaking to does not speak legalese.
That's right.
The audience. I used to work with chemists and scientists. They were the same thing. They wanted to talk about deep science, and many times just the surface level findings was more than enough to have the board make a decision.
Absolutely. And I will argue with my clients who are lawyers or scientists that even if they're speaking to a room full of lawyers, those lawyers are actually also human beings. And when it comes to an event and listening to a speaker, even a lawyer doesn't want to hear a legal brief delivered. Even a lawyer
Amen.
Wants a human being who is authentic, who tells a story, who shares of themselves. This is something else that my clients can really struggle with, and women clients in particular. The audience has asked them to appear and tell their story. And women will often say, oh gosh, it's so hard to talk about myself. Well, sister, they want to hear about you. Okay?
Yeah.
Be kind to your audience. They want, especially after COVID, we're starving for it. We're starving for connection. We're a social species. We like each other. So sharing of yourself is so much more attractive in speaking than sharing data or analysis.
Yeah. And what the picture you're painting makes me think of the analogy you brought up before, that early humans, when they found themselves confronting a group of unknown eyes, that was a dangerous moment. That was a moment that imprinted fear in them. But by the same token, ever since we were, stumbling out of the cave, when we found ourselves talking to friendly eyes of people we felt connected to and we knew, that's also imprinted in our DNA. And that's what we're trying to find, is that comfort in the room of that connection. And what better way to form that connection than to reach into your personal experiences, which are always going to be universal, right?
That's right. There's safety in it. There's everything from safety and comfort all the way to joy comes with being together.
Speaking of safety, it strikes me that a big part of what we need to do, a big part of our responsibility, is to find those safe places where we can have these hard conversations with our clients. Mm-hmm. How do you create a safe environment for your clients? What are some of the things you try to do?
I do exactly what I'm coaching people to do, which is that I am vulnerable and I am authentic, and I show them right away that I'm not a teacher coming in to school them or to push them around or tell them these are the things you do and these are the things you don't do. I'm the opposite of that. I start with a lot of questions right away, and I'm always looking for opportunities to disclose something maybe slightly embarrassing or tender or maybe funny about myself. I like to, right. I can be self-deprecating, share my own fears, my own emotion, and ask a lot of questions of my client and follow up and see where they're coming from. I will often ask them, start out and say, well, how's it going out there? Well, I could be better. That's usually what they say. I could do better. Okay. How do you know that? Is someone telling you could do better? No. How do your audiences respond? Yeah. And because people actually believe a lot of bullshit about their speaking. And again, because people who are speaking are usually pretty advanced in their careers, they can be very hard on themselves, right? And sometimes discipline has led to excellence. I don't find that discipline leads to excellence in public speaking.
Yeah.
And I find that being more relaxed leads to excellence.
It's a very good point. I want T-shirts printed up. That's nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with wanting excellence. I think that's probably why you like it, right? Because they do. Your clients want excellence, and you want to help them with that. But the route to excellence might be a little different this time.
Yeah. Being more casual than you think you need to be. Huh. I love that. And you're giving your clients behavior that they can mirror. You're setting out an example. Now, how do you feel about rehearsals? I get really annoyed when I get dismissed after the outline, after the slides are done, and they're like, "No, I'll just practice this alone. I'm totally fine."
True.
Yeah.
I know people say that all the time. Practice alone. I don't know what good that does. I mean, maybe a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit of imprinting of the words and the shape of your mouth and your brain, and But no, practice has to happen with people. I'm often telling my clients that every time they have a conversation with a colleague, particularly more than one colleague, they're practicing their speaking skills.
Right. Yeah.
And to have that mindset to say, oh, I'm at a table with 2, 3, maybe 4 other people. It's my turn to talk. I'm going to talk for 15 seconds. That's a presentation. That's me developing my speaking habits, and it's an opportunity to hone the way you do it. It's an opportunity to say less, first of all. Right? I always say less. And that's a great benefit of practice too. Nothing like practice, especially with a real human being or two or more, to show you that it's too long. If you stand in front of a mirror and practice, you'll get a little sense it's too long. But if someone else is essentially waiting for you to finish, you're going to get really aware of how way too long it is.
Yeah. And it's even better if it's someone and they're waiting for it to end. You're like, wow, if my friends and family don't want to listen to this, then strangers aren't going to want to.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So practicing is important, but I agree it's hard to get people to do that. So I like for them to have a practice mindset in all different parts of their life so that they feel more prepared, so that the moment of the speech doesn't feel like the first time, because they do this all the time. That's how I think of myself as a speaker. I do this all the time.
Although that's a dangerous place to get into too. As a speaker, I find that I do this all the time. I don't really need to practice, or I'm just going to wing it when I get up there. The audience might not be what you're expecting. So taking that time to really think about what you're doing and who you're talking in front of.
I mean, I agree that winging it is risky and can really go very badly. But if you are delivering similar information over and over, I think winging it can be a very good thing. When you're a true expert and you're going over the same stuff all the time, if you have a looser leash on yourself, I think it can get a lot more fun. This idea,
that's a good point.
Most of the people we work with, there's this fear of like, well, I got to remember everything. I think you do this every day. I think you're an expert. This is a self-confidence mantra that I came up with one of my clients. She had a lot of fear and insecurity. And the more I got to know her, the more I realized, wow, she was like a real expert at her job. She'd been doing what she was doing for 20 years. I had never met anyone who knew her shit like she did. And that I encouraged her to use that as her mantra, to walk in the room thinking, I know my shit. I know my shit, because it's true. And that gave her a lift and took away some of that fear.
I am so surprised at how high and how long some people have practiced their discipline, or how far they've come, and they still don't trust themselves in front of a room. They still feel like they're going to be caught in some question where they don't know the answer. And in addition to feeling comfortable that you know your shit, it's also okay to say, I don't know.
Yep.
I mean, how authentic and real is that?
The police don't come. When you say, I don't know. Nope. Nobody calls the cops. Nope. They don't ask you to leave the stage. It's never happened.
That whole hook dragging you off the stage
doesn't happen. Yeah. Sometimes I ask my clients when they express that fear, I won't know the answer. I'll look stupid or whatever. I'll say, has this happened a lot in your career? Do you often not know the answer? No, I always know the answer. Okay. Have you ever been disciplined or fired for saying the wrong thing, for really saying the wrong thing? Have you been, maybe something horrible happened and you lost a job? No? Okay. Do you get in trouble a lot at work? No. What? Why would it happen now? You have
Exactly.
a spectacular track record, as any successful person does. They have a spectacular track record of knowing the answers and saying the right thing or the right enough thing. It's not going to change just because they're on a program.
I just love that whole attitude and way you're coming at people, because I'm going to channel that, that I'm always a lot more diplomatic about it, but I think that people sometimes need that little slap outside the head and
Yeah.
to shake them, especially if they're on a deadline. It's like you don't have time to go into deep therapy. Like, has this actually ever, this big fear of yours, has it ever actually come to fruition? Has it actually ever become a reality? No? Okay, let's move on.
Exactly.
We got 3 days.
I really,
exactly.
I find this in particular, again, a ton of my work has been in government. And in government, you occasionally go through briefings with attorneys whose job it is to scare the shit out of you. They don't want you to end up, it's serious work. Government is serious work, and you're responsible to
Absolutely.
the taxpayers and whatnot. So you can't, there are rules that you could break where you could go to jail. There are consequences. So the lawyers scare the hell out of government employees, particularly political appointees. And they come into their jobs with this belief that if they screw up, the president will be ashamed of them. The president won't be reelected. They themselves might violate the Hatch Act, go to jail, blah, 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 blah. And so I asked them, not only have you ever screwed up that badly in your career? The answer is always no, because they're high achievers. I will also say, has this happened to any of your colleagues? No. Do you personally know anyone who has screwed up so badly that it has been on the front, what used to be the front page of the paper? No. Okay. So think about that a little bit. Get in touch with reality.
Get in touch with reality, you person.
Because guess
you
what?
Human being.
Because the reality is it's good news and it's fun. I know it's a high bar, Mike. I really want my clients to enjoy public presentations. I want that for them. I know that's a lot to hope for, but that is for me the ultimate goal is enjoyment.
And then my question is, if you're really miserable and if this really terrifies you all the time, why are you doing it?
Oh my God. Oh, same.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, what? Don't do it. Like,
if you're going to make everybody miserable,
don't do it.
Save us all the work.
I love that we have the Olympics going on right now, because I think that's a great. I love comparing things to the Olympics or Olympic athletes. Like, I like to ski, Mike. I'm not going to be in the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay. I can enjoy skiing. I don't need to be in the Olympics.
And nothing would kill your enjoyment more than to all of a sudden have to train for the Olympics, because then all of a sudden you'd have immense pressure on something that you're not at that level, or you're not at that point in your life. That's not the kind of focus you have. Yeah, that's crazy. All right. So before we wrap up here, I want to ask if you have any tips on structure. I know you've talked about how you like the structure of tell them what you're going to tell them again, and then tell them what you told them. Okay. But is there any other structural tips that you like to share with people when they're thinking about how to structure a speech or a presentation?
Yeah, think about sharing of yourself as early as possible. As close to the top as possible. How you can share about yourself. You could share, and storytelling. People talk about it a lot, and I think the term loses meaning. But storytelling can be as simple as coming to the podium or turning on your camera and saying, I was on my way here today, and I had a conversation with my neighbor about apples, oranges, and pears. And it struck me that everyone here today is interested in apples and also pears. So that makes me think, and that's a story, right? I'm actually sharing of myself, that I had a conversation with someone and we went back and forth, and it creates an image in a mind. So I think being yourself, telling a little story, or telling, hopefully a really cool story, either as close to the top as possible. And I do like to leave people with a story as well, if they can.
Yeah. Okay. So start with the story and end with the story. Yeah. Nice. And integrate it throughout when it's appropriate. Don't feel like it has to be, every 5 seconds. I feel like this is an issue that I have a lot of discussions around. I have people come to me with the misperception that I've heard storytelling is important, so I'm going to bring along a story that's not relevant to the topic or not relevant to the audience, but because it's a story, I think it's going to create some sort of connection and impact. And you're saying find the relevancy of your story before you share it. Is that correct?
That's right.
Cool.
I hope I should think back on our conversation. I think I shared a lot of stories, right? Didn't they show up?
You sure did.
Did they?
Because you're a pro. And I'm going to ask you to share one more piece of yourself. I always ask my guests, what are you afraid of?
Almost nothing. Hold on.
What? You're bulletproof.
And this is wide open, right? It doesn't have to be related to speaking or professional. It doesn't have to be work related. I am afraid of being alone.
Oh. And how do you help yourself with that fear?
I get in touch with reality. that I've never really been alone.
Yeah. You give yourself your same tough love that you give your clients.
Yeah.
Well, Jean, you're very charming. You're an amazing person. I think there's no fear of that. And I really do appreciate you taking the time here to speak to me today and speak to the audience.
Thank you, Mike. What a pleasure. I really appreciate the time that you took. And I love conversations with other speaking nerds. So thank you.
Yay, speaking nerds unite. All right. Thank you, Jean. Take care.
You too.